Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, one of the problems in life to figure out, of course, we're always seeking the truth, the facts of the matter. And this is extremely difficult to do, and this really affects all of your life. Well, who can you believe? What is actually happening? And this is difficult. And I've made a lot of lectures on this, and I want to talk about two specific people that have been one of the few out there that seem to be investigators and non-corrupt law enforcement people. Of course, one of them is Ted Gunderson, who has been dead from some time, and the other one is James Rothstein. Stein. So the whole idea is that these are two people. Rothstein is still living, even though he's getting up there in age. But how reliable are they? Now, these Ted Gunderson has come under criticism. Well, everybody comes under criticism. They are human beings. He was an ex-FBI agent, apparently in charge of some division. I don't know if that was Los Angeles or some other place. Had a lot of agents under him, etc., and got involved in research into JFK and other things once he retired from the FBI. So he seems to be a pretty good guy. Like everybody, he has his own little quirks in life, his own little problems. And that is the problem. You know, everybody is human. People are not really seeking the higher path. They want to be honest. They want to do the good things. He's come under criticism. Most of the cases that he worked on and got information from never really went anywhere, but neither has any other case by outsiders that are honest people. You present this information to a particular court or whatever, and they're not going to do anything with it. Gunderson was involved with the famous Green Beret murders at a particular base there. They made movies of this, etc., and that was his first big case. He looked into JFK and other things, and of course he was heavily involved in researching satanic cults and their actual involvement in different areas. He was involved in the McMartin preschool case, and one of the people that helped investigate and find out, along with others. I mean, other people have come forward and said, yeah, he was involved in that, but I paid the money. One of the parents, I believe, there. He was also, I believe, involved in a relationship with one of the people in McMartin's. And he, in general, seemed to have a lot of people around him and some actual contact with people. I'm not know if it's pseudo, but so he was kind of a ladies' man to a degree, to put it there. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. This guy is single. He is coming in contact with a lot of people. Why not? I don't see there's anything wrong with that. He did uncover a lot of information that went nowhere, and I'm not really sure that that has anything to do with him. I mean, people don't take this into serious consideration. It's amazing, particularly with the McMartin preschool, how this hasn't been laughed at as no proof whatsoever anything was going on. Yet they have been able to ascertain that there were tunnels dug there that were filled back in, and they had experts go in and prove this. Now, I don't know if this ever got to court or not. Everyone, including Oliver Stone, the famous movie producer, made a movie of the week discrediting that entire case. Well, that's very strange. And apparently didn't look into the case very deeply. Like millions were spent on that case. It took a long period of time where people were during the court case, and nothing happened from it. But it was something that was pushed by the authorities, by the local prosecutions, and nothing came of it. I don't know if there's a hung jury in that or not. It's a little bit of because a hung jury means that not everybody was convinced, but of someone's innocence or guilt. But that means there is a certain percentage of people that were unsure about what was going on, which again tends to make a case more interesting. But I don't want to go into the details of that. I will in another particular lecture. But we're going into where does this information come from? So you got this one particular guy who appears to be honest, doesn't appear to be some sort of fake infiltrator or anything else. And we really never know. You got to remember there's always the loyal opposition, which are ran by the same people who are controlling both sides of it. So if you want to look at things in kind of a straight political way, well, you have the right-wingers, the left-wingers, if you want to call them that, and both sides are controlled by somebody in the middle, and this is how you do things so everybody is happy. So if you only present one side, well, this is going to cause a lot of conflict. Well, where's the other side? So you put the other side up, they work for you, and it comes to so many things that we see in this day and age. It comes to a big bunch of nothing. But you got both sides, and that shuts everybody up. We do have a prime situation, and he apparently was poisoned, and that's how he died. So, arsenic poisoning or something it was, if I remember correctly, Ted Gunderson, because after you die, you turn green or something. And apparently, I think his doctor stated that this actually happened, that he was actually poisoned. And, of course, all of these things, everybody turns their back on. Even if you're ex-law enforcement, you don't really have any support from your law. You didn't have any support to begin with. And what has to be done there, and the answers to this type of corruption to make sure that we can find more police officers. And, Ted Gunderson's, I don't know, he must be dead for 20 years now. No one else has come forward and take his place. The same thing with James Rothstein is that he is another honest cop, but he's very old and doesn't seem to be anybody coming forward to pick up after his work. So he was retired, taken off a case which involved apparently CIA agents who had killed people, and he arrested them. And then when he got back to the station, national security was invoked, and he was put on retirement. So typical. So what do you do about these things? Now, he was smart enough to apparently protect himself so that he has enough information on different people, etc., that if anything happens to him, that this information will be made public, apparently. Apparently, he has that. He's talked about that in interviews, etc. So he's been able to protect himself. You wonder why Gunderson didn't do something similar. But this is, of course, what happens. I mean, this is dangerous stuff that involves billions of dollars and very influential people who are involved in all sorts of criminal activities to make more money, and even worse than that, in criminal acts of pedophilia, which are going to the highest levels. Apparently, this is a big perverted reality for a lot of people, apparently. This whole pedophilia, which is generally sexual contact with someone under the age of 13. So this is pretty dangerous stuff, and it's been even stated that this may have been what the Watergate was all about. They went in there and needed to get a list of people involved in pedophilia, and then it turned into something. It covered that up. Well, I wouldn't be surprised, and there's just so much of this, it's irrefutable. But I'm trying to get back to the chain of information. And here we got a good guy, James Rothstein, and he believes other people that he trusts or like. Now, I've heard several people state that they didn't trust this guy, who is an honest guy, but his sources of information are what? He believes his sources of information. He believes that he's a good guy. People trust him. He's helped a lot of people. And because they're his informants, and he said this many times in interviews, and he's, as I said, he's still alive, and there's lots of interviews with him on the net and on YouTube, that people trusted him. He was a good guy. He saved people, so they owed him. I think that this is kind of a naive way of looking at things in the bigger picture. Yes, you're going to get more informants. People think they're being taken care of, that you're going to protect them. This is all true. Most people that are informants have no security at all, and certainly the people they work for, the police, I'm not sure if you can count on them at all. They may use your information and throw you to the wind after that. It's all about getting arrested and putting this on your record, and they don't really care who they do that to. So it's a complicated issue. But he thinks that everybody loves him. This is a big error. He also looks at other people's work and say, well, this is really good work. And he trusts them. And then he doesn't trust and I should say, then he does trust everything coming from that person. Well, this is a big error. For a person who is so involved in so many aspects of corruption and seeing how people are compromised, as he likes to say, I think that's kind of very naive to think that a source of information that may have been good at one time is going to be good all the time for a whole bunch of reasons. One of these is the fact that he was a big supporter of Maury Terry, the ultimate evil author and researcher into the Son of Sam murders. And he basically thinks this guy can do no wrong. Well, that's a big, big error. So someone may get part of a story 100% correct and then write additions to that story that are 100% wrong. You have to know what's going. You have to look at everything as kind of an individual piece and saying, well, this all comes from this guy. His information is good, so we'll buy it. Now, this is what happens with a lot of people. He's a good source. Is he? Well, he was a good source on that particular area, but he isn't a good source any longer for one reason or another. And Maury Terry certainly is one of those kind of people with a very questionable background, a strange background, almost a nasty and secretive background. He never gave people a lot of information. He was milking his one book and this one case that he had to the highest level possible to make money off of it to survive. I mean, he had one book, and I'm sure he didn't make that much money off of that book per se. He apparently, and few people know that, even researchers of him that worked with him apparently, because he didn't tell anybody anything. People, again, think they were buddies of his because he worked with them. And he did all sorts of things. By use different names, pretend to be people in different emails. He was a very tricky guy to try and get information from people and extract information and even give out a little. But he wasn't going to say where it was coming from. So I had this very strange outlook on things. His conclusions, once you get all the facts together, is again always the questionable information. Your conclusions, once you compile facts, is really what it ultimately comes down to. And how are you going to judge those conclusions on? So he did excellent research on the actual shooting of the shootings that happened, David Berkowitz, etc., who he talked to and got information from. But I mean, David Berkowitz is a psychotic murderer. So whatever he says, well, are we supposed to believe all that? And of course, this makes their case, though. The murderous guy, who's now a nice guy, who wants to repent, says this. And of course, there's never all that much information on it either. When they give their stories, there's always huge gaps, and I can't tell you this, I can't tell you that. Well, this is so true. Because if there are groups that are involved, which he claims he was, well, they can and will take revenge against family, relatives, etc. And Maury Terry had family. Apparently, he was close to a nephew or something. He was married, but was divorced after that. So how much money he made, what he did or not, apparently he was working as a producer, so it is stated, by James Rothstein. So the whole idea is that, and this is how he met Maury Terry. And before that, he knew nothing of him, even though he was a guy investigating. He was a New York City detective investigating these different things, the Son of Sam, and so many other satanic crimes around there. But he had never spoken with Maury Terry before that. Again, even that's suspicious. Why wasn't Maury Terry, if he was so involved with the police department and others, why wasn't he actually in contact with this guy who's known to be sympathetic and honest? So you run into these things. So Maury Terry gives his take on all this stuff, which includes his conclusion on everything, which pretty much at this point is totally unfounded. There's no way to link any of this together whatsoever. And I don't care what people's statements are. This guy wrote, I was there and saw it. Well, that means nothing to me. There's no hard evidence against the conclusion that Maury Terry came up with of who was involved in this and the activities going on. But because he was a good researcher, kinda, and in general, or was, James Rothstein believes everything he said. And he is a big fan of Maury Terry because he did what is considered by most to be excellent work on the actual shootings of the Son of Sam and Berkowitz. His conclusions and where he's extra theories involved there of who was there, the multiple shooters, etc., are also very interesting. But the problem is his conclusions and his naming of who thinks is behind everything in this country, which has to do with murders of this type. And these murderers gangs out there that apparently are killing people, which I still don't quite understand how this in any way helps them, unless they're doing this in some very perverse satanic ritual where they're being empowered by it and going through this, which they think is bringing them success, luck, etc. So it's hard to say what the value of all this stuff was. And there's so many different theories going on. So the whole idea is you collect this information, you're real good at saying what happened, and you get down to the minutes of a particular case of what happens, and then you get into the things that are not provable. Who's behind it? What's the theory? What really happened? And, this is really what is important. And I'm not sure that any researcher that gets involved in those minutiae of it to begin with can come up with a good conclusion after it. They're too caught up in the locality, the localness of it. And we're not just talking about that in location, but the personalness of it that you get involved in. So the whole idea is that James Rothstein is giving this particular credit to Maury Terry as an infallible source. Well, nobody is infallible. What you've got to be always looking for is fallibility. Did they state something wrong that you know? Because this is a way to tell if someone's telling the truth. If they're going to make statements that you catch them that are out and out lies, and I've done this with several people now, well, then they don't have any credibility because they are basically stating lies. Now, where did that begin and where did it end? Well, there's no way of telling, so their credibility as a source has to be carefully watched. So I found this with many people, and this is what you want to look for as a researcher. Can you catch something that you can prove that this person was actually telling a lie? And most of these people are pretty tricky about it, but they also know that the public is really not watching this carefully. One of these things I've recently ran into is with the infamous Michael Aquino, the Satanist military officer who claimed that he was at the Army Space Command from 1990 to 1994 before he actually retired. Well, he was thrown out of the military in 1990. How could he be working there for 4 years? How do we prove that he wasn't there? How do we prove that he was there? This is a Cheyenne Mountain, extremely high-level secret project. You're not going to get a lot of people talking about that. And, of course, he was supposed to be the first person to do that. Well, how convenient, because now we can't find anybody else that said they were there. The program was discontinued, so it's not active, so there's nobody to go and talk to again. Very tricky. But, when you make a statement like this that he's done over and over again, well, that doesn't equate to the fact that he was thrown out of the military because of these charges against him. So that's what you have to look for. So the point is you can't give somebody credit endlessly to think that they are actually a good source forever. I believe that Maury Terry was a bad source ultimately. His information was strange. It was unusual. He's naming the usual red herring scapegoat, and it reeks of corruption or pressure. He could have been compromised, threatened, etc. I wouldn't doubt it with these kind of situations. He claimed to have so much information, yet he was dying and knew it, and none of this information was released of any value. Nothing new came out from him of any strength after the first book, because your head's on the chopping block now. And the bottom line is that he did have family. He claimed to have been close to a, quote, nephew. So it means that he has family, and it was supposed to be given to him and other people. And none of this has ever been released. He's got such shocking information that nobody releases it. And this is what happens all the time. And his information is what? How do we tie anybody? And the fact is that just because somebody swears to something, I'm not even talking about Maury himself, Maury, Maurice. The whole idea is that we're not talking about him himself. There could be people feeding him information that's wrong, and they'll swear to it. I was there. I saw this guy. Okay, well, I trust you, and we'll have to take that at face value. Well, you can't take that at face value. If someone tells you something, it has to be proven more than what that person stated. So this is where it's not convenient if you're trying to write more books, you're trying to do more TV shows, and other things. This doesn't add up then. Now, these are the problems that we have. So the fact that the fact that James Rothstein states that Maury was a good source, Terry, Maury Terry, I'm having trouble with his name today. Maury Terry was a great source, I think is naive. And everybody pretty much agrees with the fact that the first half of his book, The Ultimate Evil, was really very well written and done. I'm not sure how the facts are there, but everybody seems to say the facts check out and it makes sense. But that was basically just reporting the intricacies of an actual crime, which were able to be put together fairly easy. Now, once we get past that and you tie in people that are really, it's been proven to me, and I will be releasing this soon, that, the bogus information about that infamous, horrible person, Charles Manson, who never killed anybody. Some people think they did, but this wasn't some horrible predatory murder like David Berkowitz or some planning behind-the-scenes psychopath. He was a pimp and a con man, and he had very little violence in his record. This was a guy who was in and out of prison, but he also had a lot of connections. He had a escort service, as it has been reported, a physical building escort service in Los Angeles. He recorded music. Several people recorded his music, including the Beach Boys, who he lived with. I think he lived with one of them. I was involved in that. As I said, all these details get to be a little bit confusing when you read so much. So the whole idea is that he tried to get his songs published. He worked with a few movie people on music. This guy was a lot more. People think that this is some psycho out there. Who can he murder, rape, and rob? And he was outside of society. Well, he was working within Hollywood, trying to make money and become a Hollywood star and have music recorded. And it basically done. I believe the Beach Boys stole his song from him and didn't give him money for it. I'm not entirely sure for that, at least one of the songs there. But and people, when they listen to his music, if you don't tell them this is Charles Manson, everybody thinks it's pretty good. But, there's a lot of pretty good music out there that never makes it. I mean, it's like everything in that industry, acting, Hollywood, etc., which you can include the music industry, is extremely difficult to make it in. And there's a lot of problems there, which we've heard from people in rap and everything else. So it is that we know that's not the case. You're doing bad research. People are trying to tie him into things that he never did. He never murdered anybody at that famous murder. That was Tex Watson. And you should understand by just the first word there what kind of people that was. So the whole idea, he did that and Manson did not plan it, didn't tell him to do it, etc. So the point is that, and he was even offered, if he would testify against Tex Watson, that he would only get 18 months in prison. Testify against this guy and we'll get you. So he wasn't involved in the murders, and neither were a lot of people in there. There's a few people in that whole scene that were, other ones were in car. So the whole idea, there wasn't people. But if you plan or involved in a murder without physically even being there, you're considered being part of that murder anyway. So if you helped plan it, well, you did it anyway. So this is law that few people understand. So the whole idea is that he tied him into there, and I'm a little sick and tired. It's just misinformation. I have no love for Manson in any way whatsoever, but the facts are the facts, and if we don't get the facts right with these sexy, glamorous cases, I looked up Manson books on Amazon, and there must be 35 books or more on Charles Manson. I mean, really, what is with this guy? He was a nobody. He did nothing. There was a bizarre Hollywood murder that went on that he was indirectly connected to, meaning somebody that he knew that was staying at his ranch, or even what you could call one of his followers, did. He had nothing to do with that. And this is the problem with being running any organization. Oh, yeah, that guy told me to do it. Oh, yeah, I'm part of his organization, so that makes you just as bad. Well, it's just not true. It's not true whatsoever. I mean, if you're a public person, you have a lot of people that follow you and everything else, well, you're going to get a certain percentage of these people that are just bad people, and they're going to reflect badly on you. So it's just the case or not. Let's get real here, and let's not demonize or accuse people of doing things that they didn't do. Let's find out who really did this. Well, the other one, of course, which is the big issue here, which I've found pretty much the answer to as well. And both of these things I'm going to talk about, Manson and the Process Church, in a new lecture when I get that all together properly. I want to make sure that's done correctly so that we can get the facts here. So everything that ever happened on this planet seems to include two people, the Process Church and Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. And we have to get this right. People have, with Aquino, of course, we have people who are stating directly that this is the dude, and there's lots of them. So we have to really look into that. There gets to be so much of this, you have to wonder. But, that's your ticket to fame. You bring in Michael Aquino, who everybody, oh yeah, I know that guy. I can look him up online. He was on Oprah. He was on Geraldo Rivera. So the whole idea is we know this is the troublemaker. And that's, of course, why he's so public and shows his face everywhere, so that he can be more easily identified and convicted. I mean, it doesn't add up, but it does add up if you're telling a story. I can prove it's this guy. Yeah, you can't do that with hardly anything else because people don't even know the inner workings of anybody are. You know the inner workings or who the leader is of a particular gang? Well, you don't. I mean, people heard of Gotti, the mafia guy, and there was some film on him, but you don't know the head of these gangs. You don't know what their, quote, lieutenants and other people look like. There may be a few names out there, but if I was to put pictures out there, you would never know. So, I mean, there's a very famous mafia bit. Would you know what they look like? Well, I don't think so. I don't know what they look like. I've heard some names. But the whole idea is that here again you get names. So he's too easy of a target. And it's a good way to verify your position by saying it. So it's just too easy. So even if the rest of your story is right and nobody cares and nobody knows, you bring in that name and it gives you credibility, which it really shouldn't, but it does. And it's hard to believe that one person would be so involved in all these MK Ultra stuff that it's only him. And all of this stuff, a lot of this stuff even seems to take part after he was out of the military, if he ever was. Some people claim he still was an intelligence agent. I don't know. We don't know any of this stuff. How do you track that? And, of course, he's made sure he's kept his background kind of hazy so he can get out of things. But that pushes more suspicion on him, not less. But he does state where he was all his life and where he was serving his country, supposedly, where he was stationed, his ranks, everything else. I mean, he lays all that out so people know his background. And he likes that because he wants to show all the medals he got. Now, Rothstein, plain and simple, believes Maury Terry 100% and thinks he's great. And as he said, he never even met this guy. Didn't know he was investigating these homicides or anything else until he met him as a producer. Guess where he got his information? Now, he ties in with Terry, who makes a convenient aspect that the Process Church is behind all of this. And we just really can't find anything. Now, were they up to no good? Well, it appears they probably, everybody at that time frame, including Manson, etc., and everybody Manson knew, this was something everybody was doing, and they were selling drugs. Because this was a way to make a lot of money. Apparently, there were lots of contacts. Drugs were very big then. I don't know how well they were enforced or not, but you could just make a fortune selling drugs, and it was very easy. People didn't go to the cops. They didn't inform on you. I don't know how much police enforcement was going on, but this is what. So Could they have been involved, particularly in their early days and these so many other places, involved in that? Well, they certainly could have. Were they involved in this bizarre plots and murders and everything else? Well, I don't see the connection there. When you read the literature on them, they have kind of a strange Christian background. They're basically Christians, which to gain your attention brought in and preached about Satan and Lucifer to kind of grab everything. But this was supposed to be your higher and lower self. Jesus being your higher self, Satan being and Lucifer. And, this is the nature of man, they were saying. Which one are you? Are you more Jesus-like? Are you more Lucifer-like? Are you more Satan-like? Are you more into the lower and the higher? Well, this is true. And this is just, the whole idea is they presented this bizarre image to get attention. And it did work, but it didn't work long. They went from all this bizarre stuff into much more actual center of the road things, but apparently could never get rid of their past strange ways. They started out as Scientologists, which is what most of their teachings were. But you're not going to go out and teach the same thing Scientology does because they already have that market. So they had to figure, well, how do we get people in there? Then there's this strange aspect to all of them. So where they in, particularly Mary Ann, the founder of that organization, who was supposedly a call girl, an ex-prostitute, and so forth. So we just don't know. But, a lot of people are make their living that way because that's the only way they can do it. She came from a very poor Scottish background, apparently, and so forth. Now, her husband was a upper middle class guy who was studying. I don't think he completed his architectural degree, but was studying architecture. So, we need to understand all that so that we are clear that what these people were. So they preach this bizarre thing. And again, we have to take, everybody has to take things and when they happened as well. At this particular time in the middle and late 1960s and early 70s, there was a huge radical core of people preaching everything from Satanism to you name it. It was out there. So, and it was all mixed together. And the reason why it was so enthralling to everyone is it was highly mixed with drugs and sex. So the whole idea is you get what everybody wants, the out of drugs, and then you get the pleasure factors of sex, and you've got something that a large group of people indulged in. This is what they did. And apparently everybody who was kind of on the sidelines, who didn't want to get a real job that paid nothing back then as well, and certainly weren't the scholarly type, all sold drugs, because that's what area, and those were the areas and the places they were in. So people wanted that stuff, and they had lots of money, and this is how you made money, and you made a lot of it. And you can hear that from people today, that they're involved in that, because that's a way to sell, to make a lot of money. Easy, quickly, and even with a semi-minimum of risk. So they may have been involved in that. The rest of it seems to be quite the red herring. And what they're doing today and everything else has not been checked. Now, Rothstein stated that someone went to him. So he bought everything for Maury, Terry. So everything that he stated Terry, he bought hook, line, and sinker. And everything else he came up with, because he felt that his research was so good. And, he's not going to spend the time to check that in. You just, as a person who has limited time to begin with, who is researching everything else, you're going to go to certain sources and mistakenly believe everything they tell you from beginning to end forever. That's stupid, but it makes it easy for you. So he learned about the Process Church from Terry. And got all the misinformation that Terry had on the Process Church and believed it. He didn't confirm this stuff. It fit into the equation. I don't want to do all the extra research, so I'm not going to do it. Now, Rothstein, of course, has stated that he does check stuff out. But I've heard a lot of people say they don't trust him either, that his information wasn't that good that he had, and that he wasn't trustworthy for good information. Not that he was not honest, but the information that he had, lots of people have said that Rothstein did not have good information, that he was going down paths that they knew were wrong. So, I mean, this is what you get into, and even when you have a credible source like this. So the credible source like this is very interesting, to the point that it is not really credible because you can't do all the research yourself. And if you believe a researcher who is off on a tangent, or maybe being blackmailed or anything else, we don't know. But the Process Church is a good people to blame on it. There's no celebrities in there. They are nobody. As a matter of fact, most of them were not even Americans. The whole idea, there was a lot of British there. So this is an easy place to actually blame something on. So they weren't they weren't police. They weren't in any agencies. So, I mean, they're a really good fall guy, particularly with their weird attitude. But if you read their literature, and of course there are some weird stuff there, needless to say, but that was all part of the appeal. What are you going to do? Go out and redo your local Catholic Mass, or some Christian you're going to read on the street corner? You're going to read out of the Bible? Well, that's not going to get you anywhere. Nobody, particularly in the 60s and early 70s, wanted to hear that kind of stuff. There's plenty of that, and there always has been. So they had to preach something different, and they caught a lot of people's attention. They made a lot of money from their, apparently, coffee shops and selling their papers. That's what they claim. And they did seem to have an awful lot of money. Where did that come from? Coffee shops and selling newspapers? Or their publications? Well, it seems like a little bit too much money for that. Seems like it's the old cover again. So could they have been involved in selling drugs? And they certainly would be in all the locations where there's lots of people and action going on. Because they claim, well, there's a Process Church in all these cities where things were happening. Well, there's also a Catholic church. There's a Masonic lodge. There's probably a Burger King. Well, what are we talking about here? Let's get real. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because you're going to be in big cities where the action is. So it appears that may have been what's going on. Now, I've read quite a bit on the Process Church, but there's a lot more to read if you want to, but I'm not sure what are we going to find out? It takes a lot of time and energy for something that is really not that important. They were named as Satanists when they're not Satanists whatsoever. But the people that would accept them, because they used the term Satan and Lucifer, were Satanists. You couldn't go with that attitude and go to Christian groups. They would not accept you. Apparently, Anton LaVey said they were too weird for him to work with, which is interesting. So he didn't want to get in there. And they tried to get things going with everybody. So they were everywhere because they were trying to survive as a group and prosper. And now, after getting into one of their main hobbies was, and something that they found the public could get behind, and that was animal rescue, particularly dogs, etc. So animal rescue organizations, people are always sympathetic to. They don't care what your religion is or anything else. So they were involved in that. So that was a great way to start doing things. And they were raising money in that field way before they became an official animal rescue. They were like one of these Christian groups that I think there is a monthly order that actually trains dogs, and they have books and everything else out. This is how they make their money and survive. So this is part of what went on with them. Now, if you read their philosophy or anything else, other than taking a few things, and of course, they were labeled as so many other things and having orgies and everything else. Well, this was all kind of part of the 60s, and I think we have to understand this is what was going on there. Everybody was taking drugs, every possible type of drug, including a bunch of hallucinogens, LSD, peyote, ayahuasca, all these things that were out there that typically we hear about today, but this was just done by everybody everywhere. I'm not sure people understand that. There's virtually nobody in the 60s that wasn't taking some fairly hardcore drugs, as well as smoking marijuana, which was really thought to be demonized back. It was horrible. You're a drug addict. You're smoking marijuana. But everybody was doing it. So this is something we need to be very, very aware of. So, but there's no links to them doing anything. It's all ifs, ands, and buts. Well, they were in the same area that this was happening. Well, I'm not sure what that's all about, and I'm not sure how that fulfills anything. There's still a few questions, but their organization, and now Rothstein stated that someone went to him and spent 3 weeks with him telling him what the Process Church was doing at their new location as the Friends of Animals sanctuary. And this was supposedly in around 2009, which is a long time ago. And he said that he was told what they were up to there and how they had a very secure operation there that was very difficult to even get into. Well, I don't know about, I'm not sure, but there was no further talk on that. And as I said, these are one of the areas that I find very problematical to deal with, is that, I can't tell you off the air. Well, you can. You can insinuate. Because I don't know. This guy told me. It's alleged. I don't know. So you would think that there would be some of that. But, Rothstein didn't really want to get into further trouble. He just wanted to insinuate. But, the insinuating, this guy came to me. 3 weeks he spent with him discussing what was going on. There's that much going on there? And this is an organization now that makes millions and millions of dollars a year they collect in to do their different animal services. So a huge amount of cash flow is going through there. They have the usual problems. They're a close-knit organization there, very nepotismic. They hire buddies, pals, relatives, all those things that you think that a bigger organization like this would be a little less doing. But that's part of it. That's what they've always done. And have done some very good work to save a lot of animals. But there's questions still there. Some things I don't think add up that well. They have an awful lot of money. They should be doing more work than they're doing. The facility still is kind of small for someone who's getting tens of millions of dollars. So there's a lot of questions there. But what does that mean? They're rated bad, I should say they're rated mediocre out of, as all animal rescue groups are, by the way. The World Wildlife Fund has been linked to all sorts of nasty, possible alleged criminal acts, and so have most others. None of these more radical groups seem to be linked to good business practices. So we just don't know what's going on. So they all are that. So they're not doing anything any worse than the rest of them are. But what is going on there? And why hasn't anybody come out to talk about this, to know more about it, etc.? And nobody is talking about that. So they've been this animal sanctuary now for almost, 30 years now? Almost 30 years, if not longer. And there's not a peep of anything they've done criminal. They don't pay their people enough. They overwork everybody. Well, join the club. Everybody does that. You think that these kind of places would be better. They tend to use people. If you like animals, they'll bring you in to work for free. Or they'll give you a test to work, which means you work for free, and they bring test in people, which is a way to get labor, and then after 7 to 10 days, and they don't pay you a penny, and they don't pay for lodging or anything else. You have to take care of all that, so money out of your pocket. So they'll bring you in, and, 20 people will come there. They really only need 2 or 3, so the remainder will say you didn't cut it, bye. So these are all things that show the kind of bad business practices and the using of people that this organization apparently does, from what I've read online. And there's a lot online where people leave their comments on this. A lot of people love the organization, and a lot of people, particularly workers, feel that they were underpaid and overworked. And I'm sure they are. Taking care of animals is very hard work, and really it's 90% scooping poo up and feeding animals. There isn't that much more to do. So the whole idea, this is a kind of a thankless job that isn't exactly fun to do. They're not sitting around petting the animals all day and doing other things. So there's a lot of actual, just hard, thankless work going on. So, but again, we get into these areas that, unfortunately it comes to a day and age that, apparently nobody's doing anything right. Nobody has a 100% good organization. Everybody is dirty somehow. And the problem is that when you create a dirty society, you almost have to be kind of dirty to exist in the world. what you have to do things differently. You have to do things on the sly a lot of times because of the fact of improper, stupid regulations, and your competitors are basically criminals that are being assisted. So everybody's bending things in their own particular way. So there is no proof there, but this is the problem here. Here we get good people. They get information that they repeat and believe from people who are not good people. Or maybe they had good information at one time and they didn't now. So this is the very difficult situation that we have to look at carefully. Good information today, bad information tomorrow, but you're not going to do that. He's my buddy. He's my pal. He did such good work. Why would this be wrong? Well, I'm afraid it is. A lot of these things are wrong. And secondly, if it's not cut and dry, meaning this person found the facts of it all, well, then it's all their opinion. And Maury Terry's opinion on Charles Manson, the gangs that are going around, all those things, linking them all together here is a great, great stretch. Manson was never a Satanist, didn't believe it at all. Anything, he was kind of a hippy-dippy guy. He was an environmentalist and loved animals again, which is quite interesting again, because all these Satanists seem to be animal lovers. How weird is that? But the whole idea is that they're alternative people. And a lot of people don't know that about it. So the whole idea of demonizing people and they did everything is an easy out. It's good publicity. It'll get you in the tabloids, which Terry was famous for doing. That's how he made his money. He was in the National Enquirer all the time. He was on these shock shows. This is what he did to make money. And you got to come up with more and more bad facts so you can keep churning these sensationalist headlines that he liked to do. And that's exactly how he made his money from what I can see. He didn't do anything much of that. Apparently he was a producer of certain shows. He was able to get his foot in the door that way. Things people didn't even know about him. So, he did lots of other little things, but he certainly wasn't making his money off of writing. He was trying to put together another tell-all book on the Son of Sam that he expected to make a lot of money from. That never happened. Nobody even wanted to publish his book, by the way. This is what has been again alleged out there. How true. But he didn't publish another book. He published his first book, which is a Warner Brothers book. And nothing came after that. There's no there was a revision edition or something of someone, but there really wasn't anything there of any. So there wasn't a second book, a tell-all book, a naming book that came out, and nobody's been able to do this. And it's kind of folly now that something that is literally 50 years ago that we're going to find any good information on, and that there's an interest in this. But there seems to be an interest in, of course, this, quote, true crime area and crimes in general, but I guess there's a certain fascination there. But if you're trying to find out what's going on, and even if everybody knows today exactly who was involved in this, you think anybody's going to pick up that baton and go after somebody and try and prosecute them? Well, the prime example is the Process Church, which now over 30 years in business as an animal sanctuary, and not a single charge has ever been made against them. So this is exactly what goes on. And there isn't even any allegations. Nobody's claiming they're doing anything bad that I can find, other than the fact that they're a bad charity that doesn't take care of their people. They're top heavy with management, etc. Well, this is so true about so many organizations. Almost all of the animal rescue organizations have similar complaints against them. A rating of 1 to 100 by a charity organization, or I don't know, was it? But they got like 50%. So that was all they got, and this is the same thing with so many other ones. I forget the actual rating, but it was a pretty sad rating. But it's not just them, it's everybody. And they're taking in tens of millions of dollars and have a lot of people that help and raise money for them. They have set up different centers around the country that they run, giant, trying to reach a level of no-kill animal centers all over the country. This is something that is excellent work. Now, to think that this is a cover and they're doing something else, well, I find it hard to believe after all these years. And I just have to wonder why it's not going on. And certainly, apparently, James Rothstein knows what's going on there by some informant. But again, this guy comes to him. He says he's an informant. He's a disgruntled worker, or whomever he was. He didn't elaborate on who it was. What kind of information did he get, and how trustworthy is it? They don't like you. Lots of people don't like you, and particularly if you're a good person helping others, you're going to get a lot of people who attack you. This goes for everybody. They're going to talk trash about you. They're going to list garbage and lies about you on the internet. This happens to everyone, including myself. So you can't get good information anywhere. And the fact that somebody comes to you and spends so much time with you giving you information, I don't know how you can spend that much time talking about anything. I think it would be difficult to talk about 3 weeks to talk about anything. So the whole idea is that I don't know what that was all about, and nobody is talking there, and there's no further information on it. So the bottom line is that what we need to have happen here so that we can get good people to come forward. Now, James Rothstein said this. He actually said that what needs to be done, and that's right. We need to have legislation to protect police officers as whistleblowers so that they cannot be harassed, fired, etc. We have this, then people will come forward and they will state what's going on. And guess what? All this will stop. All the corruption will stop. When the corruption stops, the criminal acts stop. If people are afraid of being exposed in prisons, etc., they will no longer commit these criminal acts. Or it certainly will be majorly, if not 99% reduced. That's what has to be done. Now, this is not difficult to do. Why wouldn't the fake Congress and Senate, who wants to say how great they are, pass this kind of legislation to protect police officers? Why don't they do it? There is a whistleblower law out there, from what I understand. I'm not sure what it states, but I'm not sure and how police fit in it. But we need to have very specific legislation protecting law enforcement to come forward so that they can states what's happening, so that there is no fear of them being killed and losing everything they have, their pensions, their benefits, etc. I mean, this doesn't seem like it's difficult. Why is that not being done? Well, here we go again. It's not being done because of corruption. The corrupt people don't want these kind of laws out there. So, but I mean, that's the solution. And of course, at least he has a solution to a situation. But as I said, it's unfortunate that good people get caught up in the fact that the person they work with, they buy into having good information all the time. And even the information they got originally that they think is good, they just buy into it. It's good information, it checks out, it's well written, it's well documented. Well, it doesn't mean it's right. And it certainly doesn't mean that everything written there is right. And it doesn't mean that future information is right either. So this is where we're all stuck, and this is the system we're in, and things will never change. It's like everything else in life. Remember, you have to empower yourself. Get the edge using technologies, techniques, and tools to give you that edge, to protect yourself, to keep positive, good energies around you so that you can further build your life and not be so dependent on others as much. So keep your energies good and high, and you'll avoid a lot of the things that are going on out there. But the problem is that if you are involved in any kind of public stuff, well, your head gets on the chopping block to a degree. But you can escape most of this. The average person here is not going to have problems of too much of a level, and you should be able to dodge it. You should be able to empower your life so you can steer away from these particular problems, other things. So there's no reason to get involved in these. Stay with success science, stay with subtle energy physics, learn how to take care of your mental, emotional, and physical reality. And when you do that, life is not too bad, and steer away from so many other things. But you ought to know all this is going on. This is what we're trying to tell people. Because the problem with the average person, they're stuck thinking that society is telling them the truth. And that's what I'm trying to tell people. What you're being told is not the truth. It's lies told to you by criminals. And, even when you try and get into industries that help you and products that help you, well, there's an awful lot of fraud going on there. And unfortunately, the radionic industry itself is full of Satanists. Oh, how can you ignore that? And they advertise it. They're not even hiding it themselves at all. They come out and state they're Satanists. I mean, that's how arrogant they've gotten and how much the general public supports them. So it's quite fascinating of what you will run into with all these people. So it's hard to ignore, but as the average person, you have to stay informed. You certainly don't want to be supporting these people. And what kind of technology are you going to get, especially if they're based on higher levels of functioning, if you buy tools from people who are negative? So there's no way to get around some of this stuff, and people need to be informed about it. But getting into these issues of what's going on, which seems to be so pandemic through our entire society, of this kind of criminal activities that almost everyone apparently is involved with, and some really horrific things that have been told of politicians doing, and of course how people are murdered, how so many children are abused. I mean, what do you do about all this stuff? And if you brush into it, you have to be very careful. And how do you stay away from it? And you certainly don't want to support these people either directly or indirectly. So everybody has to be informed. So here's another fascinating little information that I think is useful to people, but you should know information from anybody. Is it still good? It was good 2 years ago. Is it good now? Is it good in the future? Well, you got to judge by that person and when. So that people may have good information and been connected 2 years ago. Now they're not. So keep that in mind. And until next time.